Welcome, everybody. I'm John Wally, and today we're going to be talking about sessions. Not just any kind of sessions, but sessions when you're communicating with AI. And to really understand sessions, we're going to have to dig in a little deep. We're going to have to talk about the LLM itself. We're going to talk about how different products handle sessions and what's unique about Eymbr AI compared to others, but also where they can be super frustrating and where they can be really rewarding to use depending on how you understand sessions. So let's jump in. Now, the very first thing we want to do is talk about what is a session. So the best way to describe a session, and we'll see this here, is a single continuous interaction or conversation with an AI system. It's typically bound with a start and an end point, but those starts and end points can actually start and end very different ways depending on the tool. So for example, some may say only so many tokens can be in a session. Some may actually let you have continuous sessions, but compress that data down so that you can continue going on. And what that compression really does is summarizes what you've been talking about so it can move forward. At the end of the day, all a session really is the context around what you've been talking about from a start point to an end point. Well, that may be a little confusing, right? We all have conversations and they have a start point and an end point, but what's that got to do with AI? Well, it all comes down to resource management. When you're talking about big, large LLMs, especially the ones that are cloud-based, they could have millions of users. How do I keep your session, hence the name, right? And how do I make sure that those resources aren't tied up when you're not using them? Because I need to give that to other users. So there needed to be a way to really manage context and system resources and a way to really maintain a conversation so I don't have to tell the AI something over and over and over again. You may ask, well, why would I have to tell an LLM something over and over again? Well, let's look at that. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump into some code a little bit. And that's not going to be super complex code, but I think it's important to understand large language models to some degree to understand where sessions come in and are really handy. All right. What you're looking at right now is a command prompt on a system that's running an LLM. It just happens to be the raw LLM that's used with Eymbr. It's open source, or kind of open source. It's developed by NVIDIA, but shared with everybody. And so we can access that LLM with no code in between us and the LLM. So let's go ahead and put a prompt in here, basically what the system sees on the back end. I'm going to explain this a little bit. So all this is doing is it's making an API call in to the actual application that's running on a very specific model. In this case, it's a Nematron model that's done by NVIDIA. I'm going to give the AI a little bit of information. So I'm going to say, hey, I'm the user, and I'm saying, hi, my name is John. Now, all the other stuff about the token count and the temperature, you don't really have to worry about. That's getting into some of the tuning on some of the models that you can do. But what's important is that we're just saying, hi, my name is John. I'm going to go ahead and hit return here, and we're working on what's called a thinking model. And I did this on purpose so that you can kind of see some of the processing that's going on with the LLM before it ever answers. All right. And you're going to see these marked with these think tags. So you're going to see a think here, and then you'll see a think that closes out right here. Kind of looks like HTML, like where you have these tags that open and close. If we highlight this, what you'll end up seeing between these tags is when I said, hello, my name is John, for example, or hi, my name is John, it's going to come back and it's going to think a little bit. It's going to say, okay, the user said, hi, my name is John. And then it says, I need to respond appropriately. Let me think. Since the user introduced themselves as John, I should acknowledge that and greet them back. Maybe say something like, hello, John, be friendly, and then perhaps offer some assistance. So you can see some of the thinking that's happening. Then it actually comes back and responds. It says, basically, hello, John, how may I assist you today? So it did all that thinking, and it came back, and it basically said, hello, how can I help you, right? Makes sense. While this is a lot of different code that you'll see in there as well for tracking things, the real thing that's important is that there's a thinking process And not all models do the thinking process, but this one does. And it came back and it acknowledged my name, said, hello, John. So I told it my name. It came back and acknowledged me as my name. That's great. But what happens when I come back and actually ask what it just told me? I basically came in and told it my name. It responded and said it knows my name. So what happens if I go back and ask it, what is my name? So what you'll see that'll happen is it's actually going to do more thinking than it did the first time because I gave it the information it needed. But what happens when I don't? So if I go from my no thinking up to my thinking, you're going to see something very different in this thinking process than what we saw before. So what you'll see here is, okay, the user's asking, what is my name? I remember that in some cases, users might mention their name during a conversation, but if they didn't, I wouldn't have it. I shouldn't assume personal information unless it's been shared. What you're going to see is like, I should check conversation history. Let me look back. And then it's going to say things like, well, there is no history. So it's going to go through this whole like approach of like, hey, maybe I should just politely tell them I don't know their name. Like, so how can that be? So eventually it came back after the thinking and it says, hey, I don't have access to your name unless you've shared it with me previously. If you'd like to tell me your name, I'd be happy to know it. How can I assist you today? So this very raw kind of approach back and forth. But why didn't it remember our name? Like we just told it what our name was. It responded with our name. And then we came back and asked the name and it said, we don't know. Why is this happening? Here's the reason why. Large language models in of themselves are stateless. In other words, they only process one request at a time and they don't remember anything about previous requests. And here's the sneaky part. That's true for all LLMs. So if you're working with ChatGPT, if you're working with Claude, if you're working with Eymbr, it's stateless calls to the LLM. So how in the world do they remember? Do they remember? Well, let's take a look. So let's go back over we can play with ChatGPT a little bit. And this is just a free version, but this works for what we're talking about and what we're exploring. I'm going to say, my name is John. And it should come back and say, hi, John, or something to that, right? Effect, right? So it says, hey, nice to meet you, John. How can I help you today? Now, if I do the same test and I say, what is my name? Will it be able to answer me? It actually did. It came back and says, your name is John. So why does it remember it? In our example we saw in code before, it doesn't remember it, but now we're seeing it does. Well, this is the beauty of sessions. And let's talk about how sessions work a little bit. So I put in a prompt and I said, my name is John. The AI came back and said, it's nice to meet you, John. How can I help you today? So that was one prompt and output. That was one full cycle that happened, right? So then when I said, what is my name? And I hit enter, what was actually sent to the LLM is all of this, all the way up to here. So when I asked, it basically saw my name here. Well, this can go deeper and deeper. You can imagine this is exponential. So every time we hit another prompt, more is added each time. A lot of times when we work in these sessions with these AI models that are out there, what can be really frustrating with a session is our session ends either because of token count or because of time, and we have to tell the model everything all over again. Have you been there? Raise the hands. So it can be really frustrating to have to do that. But we have to do that because the only way we provide context is through this really long beginning to end session that we talked about. And we need sessions or it wouldn't remember anything. But if sessions were unlimited, we'd run out of system resources because of this exponential nature of how data is processed with LLMs. So the solution for most platforms are sessions. And they handle sessions in all kinds of different ways. Some will when you get to certain tokens, like we talked about, some of them are based on time. Some of them are based on forever. For example, if you look at Claude compresses sessions so that you can keep going. And basically it'll let you move on and on and on. The other beauty of sessions is it's not lost forever. So like if I go and look at chats in Claude, these are basically their sessions. I have what is a session definition, for example, which is our topic today. I could go back and I could click on that and see the whole conversation about definitions. Or I could go out and look at a whole conversation about introductions or whatever that may be. So I can go back and click on that and get the history. Well, why in the world would I need the history? Well, here's the reason why. If I go back and I start a new chat and I say, what is my name? What just happened? Why doesn't it know my name? And I know what you're saying. It's like, yeah, but you're not signed in. It's not going to remember your name. Well, let's test that theory. I'm going to go and start a new conversation. And we're going to do this with Claude to show that almost all LLMs work this way. And I'm going to say, my name is John. It's going to come back and say, hi, John. Nice to meet you. How can I help you today? Sounds very familiar, right? And then I'm going to say, what is my name? And it's going to come back. We're like, what kind of game is this? Your name is John. You just told me your name was John, right? But I'm going to start a new session or a new chat here. And I'm going to say, what is my name? And we're in a new session. And then all of a sudden it's telling me I don't have access to your name. So what's going on? Like I thought we said that like sessions are done and like it can hold this context. But when I start a new session, I lose everything. Well, maybe not everything, almost everything. And here's the reason why. Because I'm moving these sessions. Remember we said they're bound by a beginning and an end. And what they hold is context. Well, context is key. But the more context you have, the more system resources you use. So they had to be bound some way. So what a lot of tools have done is they made it so you can put it into your profile, you can do different things, you can tell ChatGPT to remember certain things, you can use system tools to kind of like remember important things, but they're not going to remember entire conversations, and especially not over a long period of time. So when we're developing Eymbr AI, we realized this was going to be a problem. So we changed it. We deleted sessions. Now, we've learned everything we've learned about sessions so far, we can kind of delete now. Eymbr does not use sessions. So when we work with clients in the very beginning and they sit down behind the tool and they've been working with it a little while, they're like, how do I go back to my content? And we're like, you just asked for it. And because we've been so trained to use sessions, it feels like something that's missing, but it's actually not. It's there. It's all there forever. You never have to tell Eymbr ever again how to redo something. You tell her once and she knows forever. Like, how many times have you worked with a session and you had to repeat when your session ended everything? It can be super frustrating. And while I love the context that I get with sessions, I really hate the idea that I have to repeat and start from scratch on every new session. Okay, so we realized that the session thing was like, while it's great and we had context, we really needed to do something different with Eymbr. So we deleted sessions. Wait, hold the phone. No sessions, but I thought we needed those for context and for system resources and for managing all the different users and making sure that stuff doesn't blend over from one to the other. And while all of that's true, it's not for an on-prem solution because I can serve all of my users at one time. And I don't have to do that for 1 million users. I only have to do that for like 250 users. That's doable, right? So we started looking at how can we redesign this. So let's play a little game. Let's test something here. So I'm going to do very similar to what I did before. I'm going to say, hi, my name is John, just like we've done before. And we're going to see what Eymbr comes back with. And so what you'll notice is like all of a sudden there's a lot more context here. It didn't just say, how can I help you? It's like, it's always a pleasure to reconnect. Wait a minute. What do you mean reconnect? We can work on a white paper on Tenable OT false positives, like centering that we're in the background that we've been working on. We can drive into whatever needs tackling today. I'm like, well, okay, that could be a fluke, right? So instead of doing that, let's start a new conversation. We're going to start a new topic, which is typically a session, but that's not really what it is and how we do it. We're just telling really the AI that we want to switch topics. I'm going to say, what is my name? All right. And she comes back as John. But I'm going to show you something a little bit different. This is a brand new conversation, right? So what you'll see is we have no sessions, we have no background, nothing to click on to go back and talk about a very specific conversation. I can say, what is my name? She knows my name. I can say, what does she know about me? And look at what she just said. From our previous conversations, I know you own a sailboat. I know it's well maintained. It's a Catalina 34. I know you enjoy using it frequently during warmer weather. You mentioned purchasing it last year, right? Talked about upgrades. So talked about how we talk back and forth in our other chats. And so the way that Ember works is she actually has forever memory, no more sessions. And anytime you want something repeated, you just ask. If you need to see that table that you did last week, if you need to pick up your project from the other day. So let's take a look at that. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to say, hey, where did we leave off on our ISO project? Look at that. So I didn't have to go back and look at an old conversation. We're in a brand new conversation. I just switched topics completely from what do you know about me to where do we leave off on our project? And she came back and actually said, hey, this is the control we're working on under ISO 27002, 2022, control A612 training needs. So the ability to go back and pick up your projects, to work on what you've been doing before, you never run out of context. You never run out of session room with Eymbr AI. So I hope this video has been helpful. If it has, hit that like button. If you want to see these and be alerted when they come out, hit that subscribe button and the little bell and you'll be notified. We're trying to get these videos to come out at least once a week, hopefully 2 days a week as we start moving forward. We're juggling between Eymbr AI and general AI knowledge while we're still maintaining Tenable OT, and we're even thinking about expanding those into some other products like Security Center. Until next time, have a great day.